you know, snippets of information that you're sharing on varying topics is just wonderful. I just so appreciate that, you know.
I'm glad to hear it. It's
But
good.
for definite, I'm thanking you because I'm a little challenged today physically, but I'm here, and I'm thankful for that. As is customary for the Wellness Wednesdays, I ask that you do the intro to who you are. Tell us a little bit about legacy today and some of the opportunities that people can glean from uh, your profession free on Facebook through some of the videos if they have opportunity to uh, be present on Facebook and can like your page, they can have access, or even through Georgia Christian Business Network site, you're placing some there as well.
Mm. Yeah, I'm a professional counselor. I have a practice in Snellville. I've been professionally counseling for over 16 years. Before that, I was engineer and in construction and auto mechanic. But been recently, over the last few months, putting out information via Facebook live posts and taking those and putting on our YouTube channel as well, posting some on GCBN's Facebook page. But it's snippets of information, some short, some longer, and about a variety of topics from, I can't even think of some of them. This my perspective on how do we become more like Jesus, to relationships and questioning things. And I'm blanking on some. We've got more coming up. I take a little bit of a hiatus, just life kind of interrupted things, but trying to put out 3 times a week so people can get information. You're welcome to join me live. Don't have a consistent time for it yet, but try to hit somewhere around midday if possible. So go live for, I don't know, anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes, and welcome to interact with me as we do it as well. So.
Okay, awesome. And I love it that you said you took a break, and because we have to set boundaries, and that's our topic for this month, is setting boundaries, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so one opportunity to this morning that I really, or this afternoon rather, that I really want us to get in is what's the importance of setting boundaries? What exactly are boundaries? And the opportunity to empower yourself through setting boundaries. Those are some of the things that surface for me in processing this series. Okay.
Yep, definitely good questions, and remind me of those as we go along, because it's very important. The term boundaries, I'm not sure exactly where it originated, but for me, Henry Cloud and John Townsend, I believe, wrote a book years and years and years ago called Boundaries, and they laid out a lot of the principles of the concept, as well as examples in different relationships and how to apply them, and can wrap your brain around the basics so you knew how to work those boundaries in life in general. And then they have another supplemental book, Boundaries in Marriage, a chapter in the original book, but then they made an entire book on it. So it's a helpful thing, but boundaries apply in every relationship. So that's why I thought about it for holidays, since we have a whole bunch of different relationships going on. And today in particular, emphasizing how do you interact with family members who may not be treating you very well, but because they're family, which is a reason I've heard many, many times from people I've worked with of why you tolerate poor behavior or poor treatment from them, whether it's words or actions. There's ask people the question, if anybody else treated you this way, what would you do? And most everybody I ask that to, if not everybody, says, well, I wouldn't interact with them anymore for the severe cases. I was like, yeah, so where's the rule that says this, we tolerate family behaviors against us that are harmful?
Wow. And I'm so glad that we're going to talk about that, because that's something that challenged me for years, is that and for lack of a better word, I'm going to choose, we give grace more extensively when interacting in a relationship with a family member, whereas someone else, we wouldn't tolerate that. And so I want to back up just a little more to be more extensive on what are boundaries and the necessity for those, because it's detrimental if you do not put boundaries or allow boundaries to protect self. Why don't you do expound on it more?
Sure. There's several different things come to mind. As far as one idea of boundaries or explanation of it is, what am I responsible for and what are other people responsible for?
Excellent.
And that's often may go to the physical world. What am I supposed to take care of? Do I take the trash out or somebody else take the trash out? Those kind of boundaries. Those are somewhat more roles, but have ideas in them. The boundary concept we're talking about, as far as what I'm responsible for and what other people are responsible for, is more around the interpersonal interaction, and we talk about emotions, actions, and thoughts. So what we do, what we say, and what we feel.
Wow.
And that's really kind of important, because a lot of us were trained to confuse those responsibilities. Where one I see a fair amount is we've unknowingly been sort of given or tried to be given the responsibility for others' emotions, right? So we try to make them feel good, or
Excellent.
at best, we try to avoid the negative.
Exactly.
Don't upset so and so.
Right. And I want to take it, and tell me, push back if I'm taking it too deep for today's show. But you said something that's so critical. We walk on eggshells because we don't want to set it off for us. We know that particular person's characteristic. I used to have, I guess, an aversion or some sort to calling a particular person or people, because I would know and recognize that the interaction with that particular person or people was less than pleasant. And so in order to avoid the interaction and result of how I felt, I would, toe the line, so to speak. Is this sounding familiar?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is that common that people do that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the confusing part of it, is in trying to manage the other person's. We do whatever role and whatever behaviors we've come up with, either from ourselves or the environment, that apply to managing or trying to manage that other person. So eggshells is a common experience, because we want to not upset the other person, and sometimes upsetting the other person is just like kind of moving too much.
Yeah.
Right? So the eggshell thing is doing it really slowly, softly, right? Because any little step on an eggshell makes a cracks the eggshell and makes a sound. So that's, and if that anxiety provoking and constant pressure that's there is kind of emphasized in that walking on eggshells deal. And it's hugely stressful, for sure.
For definite. And then the other piece to that, the detriment to not to yourself, but to others as well, is because what we're doing in the process of giving grace, we're saying that your behavior is acceptable and it's okay, and I'm just making accommodations or adjustments on my end. And so we do a disservice, from my perspective, to the other individual if we're really not clear that somehow you've crossed a line. Because then what we do, that person goes on to the next individual and thinks that's the modus operandi. Uh, I was looking for something else though, that's okay and that is acceptable. And when we had the opportunity, because we are Christ-like, um, to help that individual to grow. And it's not helping an individual if we continue to allow them, and that behavior might be acceptable for an interaction with someone else. But more than likely is if it's in the lines of disrespect, it's just disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yes, it's disrespect regardless of it. I can think of so much involved with this. My brain goes a variety of different ways when we're talking about family members in particular or relatives, where their behavior is not something we want to allow. And right, it does a detriment to us, but it also does a detriment to them because nobody's really holding them accountable for their poor behavior. Right. And that's huge. Looks like that triggered something for you.
Yeah, because in the word that I was looking for is status quo. Ah. And you helped me further with that because in families, the opportunities are that it's a little secret and everybody knows, this is the way this particular individual operates. And so it's almost like intimidation is what I want to also throw out there to hear what you have to say about that.
There's definitely that. Yeah, there's some of the interactions and the boundaries where they get confused is in relationships where there's a kind of a normal power differential. Mm-hmm. My parent to child is a big one, where boundaries can be crossed, but it's very difficult for the child. As you're growing up in that environment, you're really low on power and responsibility because you're a kid. And the parents can interact in such a way that makes you question what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for as the child. And then that keeps going as you're growing up because you're not given any other instruction or opportunity to continue to grow and match the parent. There's always that intimidation kind of factor happening in it. And then even if it's just as the child, you carry it with you, that constant feeling of being intimidated or underpowered by the relationship dynamic. So it doesn't matter how old you are as the child, that still can play a huge factor in it where you're intimidated by them.
Wow, that is so powerful. Sometimes when you begin to grow and to recognize that it is acceptable for your well-being to set boundaries, other people are not as receptive to that. And I want to thank those that are on Zoom with us, Pamela and Bianca, for joining us on Zoom. And there are also a few people out there on Facebook Live. Thank you so much for participating. I know Jessica's out there. Thank you. But Bianca, speaking of Bianca on this call with us, a few days ago when she saw the newsletter and that this series was upcoming, she ran across something that I want to share right now that I believe is essential right at this moment. Is the only people that are going to be upset with you for setting boundaries are those who have been taking advantage of you and not having any. And I love that. And that was a quote, a meme that she had sent over to me to check it out. And I made a note to bring that up today because that's true. But honestly, just to continue from that quote is they're upset possibly because we've done them an ingest of saying, this is the way I'm supposed to operate. Now I'm set in my way. And when I get set in my ways, the opportunity for me to make an adjustment, because for so long, I heard a preacher say once, wrong's been wrong so long that it starts to resemble right. And so no one has ever said, that's not acceptable, that's not okay. And that this is a boundary, and especially in families, the conversations start, like you said, around the holidays. We already position ourselves, and COVID's helped us to a certain extent with some of that
Yeah.
interaction, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so, but we position ourselves and we start to say, okay, we start to adjust, and the boundaries are set by us, for us, rather than outwardly saying, no, we're not going to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Or, no, this is not an option for you to be able to contribute to in my life. You know, those are boundaries. Those are types of opportunities where you get to draw the line. You don't allow other people to draw the line in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Right.
that the way you think, Rich?
Yeah, that's definitely a way to explain it. And definitely thinking from there's an adult perspective when you start getting an idea of this, that wait a second, you're trying to tell me what to do, or you're trying to tell me what I'm supposed to be feeling, right? Or you're trying to get me to just believe what you believe, and looking at that and saying, well, I don't have to do that. I don't have to allow that to happen. Um, but when you start adjusting the boundaries, because this person is not helping you with their life, they're confusing you, they're going to be surprised, they're caught off guard, not understand typically, because they're going to kind of gotten the message, like you said, that it's acceptable, it's the status quo, it is the way things are supposed to go. So people don't like change is another factor in this. So when we decide to make some changes, the people around us probably are not going to be on the same page with instituting some change. So you're going to get pushback from that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking about family members in the dynamic, you we think sometimes just about individual relationships. Like I was talking about parents before. Maybe there's a thing with mom or dad. Typically dad could be an angry one, but maybe mom is anxious or even angry or gets upset easily. So you have that relationship. But then you have the system. Say you have siblings, aunts and uncles, cousins that are all part of this, and you have a particular way of functioning to interact with this person who has kind of been violating boundaries for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You want to change something, you get pushback from that specific person, but you may also get pushback from the people around you because your role has been benefiting them in some way or another to, at least make it not negative, right? You're the buffer, you're the golden child, you're the scapegoat, you're whatever. You're not playing that role anymore. Wait a second, they're going to turn that on us, or we don't know what to do now. You were taking that for us, so now they're trying to crisscross boundaries as well and saying no, we're not going to be responsible for boundaries with this person. We kind of want you to do it.
That's your role. You were
Exactly.
the buffer there. And so I love what you just described, because now you introduce another realm of how people have become comfortable with the meme that Bianca had shared. Because not only is an adjustment for you with whatever is directly facing you, but all of the surrounded. I've never even considered that, because that protected other people from having to set boundaries because, oh, Beth's got it or Liz has it, she'll make it right, or, that's a lot of weight.
A ton of weight. Absolutely.
A lot of weight. That's burdensome.
Yeah. And it's one of the perspectives, and because I engineer, look at it this way, but there's also, just a psychological approach to this that describes it. It's family systems. Right?
I've read.
Right.
Yeah.
So the analogy or parallel was ecosystems, and that ecosystem is sort of an isolated idea or group or whatever you want to describe it as, system, because I'm trying to come up with another word and I can't, of different parts that interact with each other. and they all kind of have a particular role, and that system, that ecosystem gets into some sort of balance, but it may not be the healthiest balance, right? And that's
Dysfunctional. Totally dysfunctional is what you're
dysfunctional,
describing
but
to me.
it's balanced. It stays the same,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't change. The way the system is today is the way it's going to be tomorrow, is the way it was 15 years ago, right? It's balanced. It's there. It's stable, but it's dysfunctional. Now you have, but that ecosystem, it's, you don't, the whole system doesn't have to change kind of in unison. One part of that system can change.
Just interrupt that. Yeah.
Yeah, it changes. It does something different. And now the rest of the system has to try to adapt to it. But the tendency is not to change and adapt, but to pull the changed agent back to where they were. The way it works, right? People don't like change. They don't want to disrupt.
So we've got to pull it back. Yeah.
Yeah, you pull it back, right? There's a resistance there, and it's in ecosystems as well, from what I understand. You change something in it, and the system is now trying to pull it back to where it was. However, that does it is pretty complicated ecosystems as well as family systems. But it's what happens. And when you're looking to change boundaries in family, like you're making a decision, I have to change some boundary. You have to also recognize and anticipate there is going to be pushback from probably a variety of sources at the same time, and being sort of braced for that, prepared for that, expecting that, so you don't necessarily go, hey, I changed boundaries over here. Aren't you excited for me, this other person? And they're going, what are you doing? You're making a mess of stuff. No. Stop that. Go back to the way it was. And now what you thought, where you were hoping was going to be an ally, is now somebody that's not helpful.
Wow. You know, I love this. And I just took a second to text a few siblings that I think I did. I was like, you got to get on this call. I think Rich is reading our mail today or something. Yeah. And I did, because this is so good. This is something you're actually articulated, something that I was trying to explain to one of them just recently, is because honestly, the backlash happens as long as we're flowing and you're allowing that family member, although everybody's behind the back, you know, and because we're Christians, I got to put that out there. It's not pleasing to God.
Oh, not at all.
We're just season our words with salt, and we're supposed to speak the truth in love. And the outcome, we worry more about being received well, and whether or not this person is going to like me. I know in weeks to come, as we continue this discussion on boundaries, we're going to enter into other relationships. But maintaining the family unit is so crucial to moving forward in the kingdom, rather, and making certain that our family ties are managed. You're not decently in order, just to finish that out, but we're not responsible for the outcome. And I think if you talk to us a little bit about that, we own the outcome. And I want to add just one thing. One particular family member, we know how this individual is, and another one was sharing with me, she was asking me such and such. I said, that's a boundary. That what I was trying to say is that's a boundary. I said, you should have turned around and asked her, well, how much are you, you know? And she said, well, you know how she is. That's exactly what she said to me. And I just told her anything, any number. And I said, that's still not comfortable. I still don't think. So I backed up, because when you give the feedback, and because of where I've been with that, I was able to recognize it. And it hadn't been a long number of years that I've actually been able to grow to that point. But I understood that, because you're telling me about it now, you're really kind of feeling as if your boundary was crossed. But instead of managing from that angle, you chose to once again to suffer your feelings that you had been, I guess, almost like invaded a little bit, or the line had been crossed. And now you're all in my space where I don't even want to be. I don't even want to have this conversation with you. And what I'm saying is, you can say, you know what, we can talk about something. I don't mind communicating with you, but we're going to have to talk about something else.
Yeah, there are a variety of options. Definitely. You're giving an example of interacting with a sibling. It's been interacting with another family member, and right. And you have sisters, so I'm kind of figuring there's some involvement there. We'll keep your specific stuff out of this, but you're talking about one sibling, about a different sibling or different family member, and about how this person you're talking with has been interacting with the other person. And there's a boundary there between the other two people, but also between you and the person you're talking with.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want that person to behave differently. And when we try to do that or encourage them to, and we go too far, we're crossing the boundary.
Yeah.
Right. We're saying, why don't you do that with that other person? And that will make everybody's life easier. Right. We're pawning off our responsibility a bit sometimes too in that interaction. Right.
Yeah.
Or we're right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, or I'm wanting you to come out here on this limb with me because I've already done that. And you're saying in your mind, I see what it got you. So I don't want that.
Right. Exactly. You want some allies in it as well. And
yeah.
That's, it just pops into my mind, the non-Christian family, and one of the members of the family becomes a Christian. I think sometimes it's like a child, adult child or a teenage child or something like that in youth group or college or something. And I was the Christian in my family, became a Christian, and the worldview is different, the desires are different, the approach to people is different, right? And you're working on allowing Jesus to transform you and the Holy Spirit to have his effect on maturing you. And you have these family members who aren't on the same page, so now you're the outlier. And that's not comfortable. It's not where you want to be, because what are you wired for? You're wired to be in a family unit, right? God brought us to be his kids because he's our dad and he wants us part of his family, right? We're wired for that. So when you're that first Christian in the family, and it doesn't mean anybody other else in your family is ever going to come to Christ, that you would like them to, partly because you're really concerned about their salvation, but partly I think too, it would be nice to have a family who's all founded on Christian worldview and all saved. And now we have a bond that's in addition to where we may have been, or it brings in a whole bunch of positive bonds that have never been there. But there's a lot going on in that. But so there's being the outlier, the desire for family, the pull to have the group that's all together. There's a lot going on there. And then taking that bold move, right? There's lots of different examples popping in my mind, but some of them coming from other religious perspectives. And depending on that religious perspective, if the family member becomes a Christian, they're written out of the family, right? So this person, when they're coming to Christ, has not only, wow, I'm going to be reborn, but I'm going to be written off by my family completely. And that, imagine that's an incredibly difficult place to be. But then they often find family in their fellow Christians, which offer support in that, which is wonderful. But there's still that nobody wants to be disconnected from the family they grew up in. Ideally, we all want to have a functioning, loving, caring, mutually beneficial, mutually interdependent system of people where we're okay to be ourselves and everybody likes us and accepts us and we do the same for everyone else. But
it's it costs a lot. It's costly.
Extremely.
At times, because the thing that you have to understand is the authority level is that Christ is well pleased with you. And I know I'm talking about a maturity opportunity here, because if you start off and you said, I found this new Christ and he's in my heart and he's changing my life, I don't even think the way I used to anymore. And really you're excited because it's an awesome thing for you. And it's a growth step from a spiritual standpoint and from a life standpoint. Yet when those that you just described as family, those that you love, that you've grown up with, and is all you've known, and then they're not as receptive to you because, you know, where is this coming from? You know, we always did this and you're not doing it now. And so the pushback is causing you to be in a position where, you know, do you compromise my values? Do I compromise the opportunity for me to continue to grow? And this is something that I enjoy and that I want to do in my life. And now you're telling me, no. What is that?
The compromise thing is a huge deal because in boundary violation, that is kind of what we're doing. We're compromising ourselves in the process, right? And we've been doing that to some degree or another in the interaction with family members, right? To get one thing, we're compromising something else. Right? What I find when I work with people with family things is, you know, but we're family. And so there's a expectation or desire of what that can be, or at least they'll accept whatever they can or have been able to get. And in order to get that, they compromise other things, right? I'll tolerate this behavior. I'll go to mom's. I'll listen to Uncle Fred just blah, 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 tell me stuff all over the place or criticize me, or right, I'm not able to do anything right. I'll be compromising my emotional well-being in order to get something that seems somewhat beneficial, rewarding, satisfying in the process. And that's where the one area where confusion happens when we say this family thing. And we've been talking about so many different components of this in the last 35 minutes of our conversation that boil it down, it's definitely compromising some things that are important to us that are true. And that comes back to our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors. We compromise owning those and having our own responsibility for those in an attempt to get something, right, that seems sort of satisfying. I'm not sure if I'm explaining all that correctly.
No, because the gratification that comes to me for just, and that's why we compromise for definite. But the thing too is, how do you begin to set the boundaries? Because it's critical that we establish boundaries, or the self-fulfillment. You know, how do you close your eyes at night and you replay the day? At least I do. And sometimes the opportunity is that I'm not pleased with how I responded. It didn't help me. It didn't help the other individual. And so years ago, I decided it's easier to deal with it in the moment rather than get to night and then to do the process. And, you know, yeah.
And that's definitely true. Look, we're ultimately looking at practicing boundaries in the moment, but sometimes, or I think early in the process of this in particular, when I'm working with people or even thinking about what you're describing in your own journey on
Mm-hmm.
developing boundaries, there's an awareness that has to come first. And initially, like I said earlier, in other things, if we don't know there's a problem, we can't address it.
Right.
What in the world?
Oh my God. Oh my
That
God.
okay.
Yeah. We've been invaded. I've been removing as we go.
Oh, good. Thank you. That was awful.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, somebody hijacking our Zoom call. Lovely.
Yeah.
Welcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that just
Yeah.
took me off track, which is what
I'm
that's
removing left and right. Next, we're going to start to use a password.
okay.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Before
We're
we
gonna have
let
to.
you in, we're just going to have to, because it's just flooded and I'm just removing and removing and removing. So my apologies that you had to see that, guys.
Yeah, okay. That sidejacked my brain. Talking about violating boundaries, it's
Yeah.
definitely one right there
Yeah.
where there was something we didn't ask for that we were given.
Right.
And
Right.
that's a boundary crossing too. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible, right, part of it is honoring what the other person's yes and no
Mm-hmm.
in it. But we go back to we're changing a little bit to how do you actually deal with some of this boundary idea of with people, and that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right, so going back to you have to be aware of it initially, then you have to look at what are some of the things that are being violated. What does a healthy boundary look like?
Mm-hmm.
I think as we look at our hearts, when we realize, man, that doesn't feel right, or that doesn't feel good, that feels offensive, or that feels slimy.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably where a boundary may be being crossed, and
Mm-hmm.
then look at what that boundary is.
Mm-hmm.
We got to do stuff offline before we can ultimately do things online in the moment
Mm-hmm.
and be able to practice things we're going to do in the moment, right? Where you say, one of the things sometimes I tell people I have to do, especially in a holiday season now, is you have maybe a pattern of how you celebrate. We go to this person's house, we do these things, we do that, whatever it is. And some of those experiences put you in a position where you feel violated, or you are actually violated,
Mm-hmm.
or you're burdened with something, or somebody's expecting you to do something to
Mm-hmm.
fulfill a role, right? And to go along with, don't upset this person because this is what they want. So if we just go along, we make them happy, or we don't make them upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, doesn't matter. Show up, right? You're telling everybody, well, just show up. Just don't not come, because if you don't come, then this person's going to be upset, and we're going to have to deal with that before, and it's going to be a ramification to everybody. Exactly. So there's that sort of pattern, but recognizing that, boundary says I have the choice whether I go or not. And right, that system, we're the ones that are going to change something in the system. Like, right, I'll ask clients, right, well, what can you do here? Do you have to really go? No. Can you choose not to? Yes, absolutely. Well, what would happen? Well, we'd have all these things. Like, exactly. That's what happens when we start changing how we're approaching boundaries. But not going is an option, and it might be the healthier option that you choose this holiday season, right? To not go to that particular celebration party person's house
Mm-hmm.
because you're expected to and you've always done it. You're actually saying, I'm going to do something different this year. I'm not going to do that. And then you experience some ownership of your own life. And you have to process through too that this is a healthy boundary. I do have the ability to choose. It is okay if I don't go. Yes, the other people are going to be upset, and I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just not cooperating with what they want me to do, but them to sort of wanting me to do it is kind of a demanding me to do it, which now is crossing a boundary. So
Yeah.
we can determine I'm not going to go home for Christmas. I'm not going to celebrate this New Year's with these people. Right? I'm going to go do something different.
Mhm.
There's options. Now, do they feel ugly? Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they're very, very uncomfortable, and that to me is also an indication that what you have been doing has been violating boundaries.
Wow.
Because you've now uncomfortable because you don't want to upset this other person. Like, exactly. You've been motivated to do that other thing because you don't want to upset that other person.
Wow.
That boundary flag going up.
Let's say in that same setting that you just described, though, that you do elect to go because you want to be there.
Yep.
I think the boundaries then start to look a little differently in that you set the boundaries as to what you will allow. Like if you go to a family and they're always questioning you about things that are off limits, and that is a boundary for you.
Mhm.
And wanting to take you places, maybe into what are your plans on this and this and that. And really, we don't have that type of relationship that we should be sharing about that, those type of things.
Exactly.
And there's an opportunity for setting a boundary aside from not showing up, because I've tried some of these things. And I'm like, I really don't have a problem with being there. But
Yeah, that not showing up is probably the most extreme. You're bringing up some great um, other levels of boundaries. And you're talking about there, you want to go. Great, go because you enjoy it. Nothing wrong with that either. It's you're voluntarily choosing to go, to own that it's a choice that you're making. It's not because you feel demanded or expected to do it. You're actually saying, no, no, that's really enjoyable. I want to go there. But this person or this thing may happen. And typically I've just absorbed it or accepted it.
mhm.
And what can you do this year that is not accepting it, that is drawing a line? Like that person that wants to question you about things or criticize you or critique or whatever. What's a healthier response? What's right? Typically you've just accepted it. Well, that is one response, is to absorb, move on, pretend, right? Or whatever. Or you can hold them accountable to it, or at least say, I'm not going there. Right? It's kind of like you decided to go to the activity. Now you can decide whether you have the conversation with the person or you have the conversation farther than it's gone. And you've processed it offline, so you have some options going into it and you're prepared. Right?
Mm,
Maybe or maybe it won't happen this year, but if it does, you have a healthier option
exactly.
that you've decided, accepted, agreed upon that you're going to do as an exercise of healthier boundaries this year. And it may be things like, hey, I'm just not talking about this year, or I'm not talking about politics anymore with family, or hey, sorry, that's not someplace I'm going to go with you, or having something. And sometimes it has to be several steps,
Mhm.
because I'm thinking if you say I'm not going to go there, maybe the person's coming back with, oh well, come on, we're not going to get an argument with. It's no big deal. I'm just really just asking you this.
Yeah,
I just want to know
yeah.
your perspective. And you're thinking, no, you don't. Nice manipulative maneuver, buddy or sister or whatever. You have to have now another boundary declaration in there, right? So you have, even if it's going back to the word you use or phrase you used before, I'm not going there,
Yeah.
right? That's one. You keep it simple. Maybe there's other things you need to address. Maybe it's you get up and walk away. I don't know, but there's options there that you have to think through, so you don't get snagged and have pulled back into the same thing. So you go home at night going, well, I did it okay up until that point, and then woo, I went off the tracks, and the same thing happened again. Sure. So I have people like a decision chart that I describe sometimes. You know, you have an event and then you think about your options, and there's always at least two options.
Uh-huh.
Right? Sometimes one of them is one we don't really want to pick, so we throw it out. So we think, oh, I only have one choice. Like, well, no, you really don't have just one. You have two at least. And so decide which one you're going to pick, and then think through, okay, if I do that, what might happen? Right?
Excellent.
And then in that, what are you going to do in response to whatever that is? What are your options, and which one are you going to pick? And then play that out as far as you need to go, so you have uh, tools, scripts, activities to declare and practice a clear boundary with
Mm.
this person in this circumstance there.
One of the things as I listen to you that interferes when we come to setting boundaries is, how do I deal with not being as acceptance? How do I deal without the rejection that could come, and most likely will when you're dealing with family, because there's something about families, and maybe you could term it clinically, um, when the expectations are, because we're siblings, that gives me more of a grace, more of an opportunity, or we're family, I'm supposed to be allowed to almost to the point of abuse, you know. And I'm not talking, you know, be physical, but the detriment is to yourself, from my perspective, is if you're not setting boundaries, your standards are lowered, just like anything goes in my life. And I'm not comfortable with myself, and I'm disrespecting self is what I hear here. And then in addition to that, I keep taking it to God. Is he well pleased? Because God definitely is a God that will challenge growth in you. And the other thing that I'll say too, and then I'll pass it back, is when we grow and we begin to set boundaries, then we give permission for others to grow as well. If I somehow set the boundary and I endure the backlash, whatever that looks like, ostracize or whatever, you know, rejection, all of that, but I continue to maintain Christ-like in my relationships, in my dealings with the individual, and not giving in to however their approach may be unwelcoming, unfavorable. But I actually, somebody's watching, and somebody sees, and somebody's saying, wow, I now have permission to do this a little bit differently, you know?
Yeah.
That's the way I'm hearing this right now.
Absolutely. Our actions influence other people as well, what we do and what we say. Absolutely. So we can be an inspiration or a door opener, so to speak, for other people to follow us along in healthier interpersonal relationships. Most definitely. Trying to think. Oh, the going back to, I remember how you said it, but um, idea of giving grace and wanting acceptance and that sort of thing. One of the questions to think about um, is, well, what have they been really telling you up till now?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Based on the way they've treated you, how or what value would you place upon someone who is being treated that way? Right? Treated like a slave, treated like a inferior person, right? Well, then you've been believing that that's true.
Mm-hmm.
You've accepted that that's your value, that's your worth is only enough to be treated that way. Because if
Mm.
you valued yourself more, you wouldn't be receiving that sort of treatment. You would change your response to it. And then going to God, and this is critical because as Christians, to me, it's the only reference point that I can turn to that is what am I thinking? Not relative, but specific or not immovable. the reference point of where our value comes from, right? If we're humanistic, our value only comes from how much other people value us, right? It's that
Right.
economic thing that so and so, that's such and such thing you're going to sell. Well, how much is it worth? You know, well, as much as somebody wants to pay for it, that's what it's worth. Really, that's all it is. Right? That's the stock market. Well, what's determines the price of the stock? What somebody wants to pay for it.
Right.
Right.
I know the value that is set on who you are and who you want to be. It's like one man may call another man's prices high, so to speak. But that's the value, that's the way that he values himself. And as a matter of fact, my son, Romy and Jerome and I got into a conversation about this very thing, about whether or not someone's high in the way the prices that they've set for their service that they perform or provide. And I say that the worth is determined by the individual. That's what Romy and I were saying. And if you don't like their prices, you don't have to use them. Okay.
That's healthy boundaries too, right? I don't want.
Right, for definite. And so the thing that is, how do you value yourself? Is this the way that you want to go out? You know, and what you're doing is you're sending a definite message to that other family member or individual that says, you know, you can just about run over me with a railroad, with a train, just put me on the railroad track and just run right over me, because, you know, and then at the end of the day, have you brought God the greatest glory in your life by doing that? God is not, I mean, decency and order, yes, by all means. God is not the author of confusion, yes. I agree wholeheartedly, but God is not a pushover God. The kingdom of God serves the boss.
No, he doesn't say, oh, that's all you want to pay to get into heaven? Well, okay, I'll give you that deal.
Yeah.
You either pay this price or you don't. That's
so,
Christ or don't.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's either follow Christ or don't. He knows how much the relationship with him is worth and what it cost him, right? He was willing to pay the death of his son for the relationship with us. So that's what I was going back to as Christians, and as a Christian and as a counselor, and how do I work with people? I have to bring the reference point to, well, what's your value? Your value is determined by God. If that's true, then your value is determined by what was paid for you to be bought. And that was the death of the Son of God, right? And, you know, one additional thing to think about for value is we will pay for something that we'll die for somebody who is a family member, somebody we love, somebody we care for, right? Because we value their life. But how much would you take a bullet for somebody that hates your guts? It's a complete enemy, right? Somebody that's totally against you, really wants to see you die. How much would you take a bullet for them, that you would die in place of them, right? It's astronomical to think that that's even something that would be possible.
Conceivable. Mm-hmm.
Right, it's inconceivable. But if you did that, what would that imply? It would imply that that person who is your enemy is valuable enough for you to pay your life for them, even if they're not kind to you. Well, in essence, that's what God did. We were enemies of God. We weren't with him for him. We were denying he exists. We were belittling him, name calling, all kinds of other yucky, nasty things. And God said, okay, I'll buy you. Yep, sold. You're like, oh, wow. Okay, so there's the reference point for your value is it matters absolutely not what you do. Zero, period. Not end of story, nothing. Even actually, if you do bad things, right? That's not, it's not that that's okay, but that's still paid for, right? It's not like you have to make up for it. It's already bought. So your identity and your value is off the chart. So if you go into circumstances believing your value is off the chart, that you recognize you were paid for by something that's immeasurable, then what are you going to do in interacting with people? You're going to be really too concerned about how they value you? No, not really. If they, oh, I need them to accept me. Well, no, you don't. Really? Does it matter? No, right?
Yeah.
Because before you would do things to probably compromise some of your beliefs, values, views of yourself to get this other person to approve of you when they're really not approving of you. They're approving of some distorted, manipulated presentation of you with stuff that's not you, so that you, to them, you look acceptable, right? That's not even being picked for yourself, right? That's only for some concoction where you're going, rather versus going in with, well, I know I'm valuable. I don't need your approval. And this is true. This brings glory to God. This lines up with how I'm valued. So accept it or not, it doesn't matter to me, really. I'm good. My dad thinks I'm awesome. And that's what Jesus did. It's exactly what he did. He had nothing to prove. He didn't come to gain the approval of men. He came to buy us. He came to draw us back and tell about the kingdom of God. He didn't come to prove himself worthy or good enough or get the men to go, yeah, you're the man. Oh, thanks. Oh, yeah, we get it now. You're great. He didn't care. Right? If you believed in him, great. If you didn't, right? The rich man, well, what should I do to get in the kingdom of God? Sell everything? Well, that's going to be hard.
You know, Rich, this is so good. And this is so healing. I hope, I don't know what I'm going to do about the replay because of that interruption, but this is so.
Yeah, I know if you can edit it out, that would be great.
I can edit it from this Zoom, but I don't know about Facebook Live, how to edit that out or whatever. So I might have to delete it there and just repost it from Zoom. But this is so healing. I can just hear an anointing. I can feel the anointing on what you just said. I have to make a couple of statements. We started about 5 or 7 minutes late, so we're going to
we need to go on for lunch purposes.
But because this is very, very important. While we were yet sinners, I believe it's Romans 5:8, Christ died for us. And that value, just to your point, is just so great. We're so worthy of the best treatment ever. And if we would enter relationships with what you said, what he said, okay, knowing our value, knowing that God greatly valued us, that he gave his only begotten son, that places us on a different playing field. If people don't receive us and devalue us, then listen, it doesn't even matter. What matters is what God said. And that is so important. We have to understand that if God is for us, who dare be against us? And so you opened all of that. But the other piece to that, I think, is so critical. And we're going to get into some of this next week when we talk about, do you visit or do you not? I can't wait to hear more about that and to talk through some of those opportunities, because one of the things in valuing yourself, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday with Pastor Victoria Creppy when we did Take Charge Tuesday and talked about influence. Oh my God, she was so powerful. But one of the things is being influential. You can tell there's an air about people like that. And it's not arrogance or anything like that. Sadidi, some would say, or are pretentious, but it's a confidence is what I want to say today that comes from knowing who you are in Christ truly. Okay. And when you know the value that and recognize, even sometimes we know the value that he's placed upon us, but we succumb. And so I say we don't fully embrace who God says we are, and that he gave price for us, that his life, the exchange, so to speak, because we're still trying to measure up to someone else's expectations. We're still trying to qualify, if you will, on someone else's playing field or to get on their team. When we're on the best team ever,
We have to recognize, and you're totally right. And it is difficult because there are things deep in our hearts that need to be looked at. And if we don't acknowledge them, God can't fix them. God can't address them. We can't take this message of our value to those deep places if we don't look at it. And there are legitimate, deep down, authentic, God-given needs that we've had all of our lives that were supposed to be touched, ministered to by family members, parents, other people that may or may not have been addressed or given any acknowledgement or fulfillment to any degree. Those are still needs, and we have to validate them. And then there's a lot of pain that's often associated with that, fear, various other things, but we have to present that to God and allow Him to minister to those same needs. And that's, to me, taking the gospel to the depths of our heart. That's a journey. That is not something that happens fast. We can't just will this to happen. We can't just white knuckle and I'm going to hold on to that belief and expect transformation. It doesn't really work that way. It works by surrendering what this stuff is in our heart. Like I said before, you have to be aware of it so you can acknowledge it, surrender it, and talk through it, because it doesn't just go away easy. It's not like you're just pulling out, oh, okay, it's good. There's a lot of things.
You're talking deep. Yeah.
It's huge. So we can't downplay this. We have to really make it as significant and sometimes challenging as it is. I mean, there's a reason why you went into your 50s or so until you really started applying some of these things. Right? That's a long pattern of doing the same thing. If it was easy, right? You grew up a Christian, right? This stuff shouldn't have even been an issue for 50 years, but it was. Exactly. It points out the significance of it.
Yeah.
Right? Validate it for what it is. You're not going to get rid of something this powerful in a snap of a finger or believe it that fast.
Well, boundaries are really so important. And this is a deep discussion here that is very much and often evaded by even Christians, because that word that I was looking for, status quo, it's just, let's keep it going. Let's keep everything smooth. And the assumption by most Christians is don't rock the boat. And that is not necessarily the best way to give God His glory. Sometimes we need to rock the boat.
Did Jesus rock the boat? Did Jesus rock the boat?
Yeah.
Like His main mission.
Table too.
Flip it upside down. Right?
Yeah, and turned over the table. And, He wasn't afraid, intimidated by being put to death. Okay. But sometimes, and I mean it right now, put to death in a sense of rejection, whatever that looks like for your life, that if you stand for Christ and what He lived for, then sometimes that ought to be your motivator, the inspiration that you need to do the things that will challenge. Because again, I heard a minister say, wrong has been wrong so long that it starts to look like right, because no one's challenging that status quo, so to speak. They're letting the boat just stay smooth sailing. So they think that in a minute you're going to hit an iceberg.
Right, you're going in the wrong direction, but it's not upset. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been great today. I appreciate your time. I'm so glad for the work that you're doing at Legacy. And thank you for your contributions to Georgia Christian Business Network as a corporate sponsor, and for this Wellness Wednesday platform. Your faithfulness here has been appreciated. You'd even come on after surgery, after 24, 48 hours of surgery, you're here. So we appreciate you and we say thank you. Pamela, thank you for joining us today, Pam. We appreciate it. Hopefully this was good for you, and Bianca dropped off, but we've got a consistent flow of a few people on Facebook Live. So we appreciate that so much. Thank you, Pam. Hey, clap, clap. Okay, wonderful. We appreciate that. What I'd like to say quickly is next week, Tuesday, Take Charge Tuesday, Flem Hollis. We are so excited to have him on the platform to talk about financial strategies for rebounding in a pandemic. And so that's going to be wonderful. Tell your friends, get on, because people are really challenged financially during these times, but he is a financial guru. We have an announcement to make about Flem's involvement with GCBN, so we're totally excited about that. Join us at noon on Tuesday. In addition to that, next Wednesday, Richard gonna be back, and hopefully Pamela will be back to the platform. She's closing on her new home. Congratulations, Pamela. And you guys are going to continue this discussion on boundaries. And then we'll go to third week of December also to talk with Janine Hammond on our Take Charge Tuesday platform. It is going to be outstanding. That is a powerful young lady. And then you'll be back for the third week right before the holidays to continue and then conclude our discussion on boundaries. And we're going to take off the last 2 weeks. Yeah, we're going to take off and enjoy our families and try to catch up on some work and writing and such. But
you can watch some of my videos, because I'll probably be putting stuff out during those 2 weeks anyway. So
we'll definitely put those on the GCBN Facebook page so others will be able to participate and have something to keep as we grow healthier and we determine to be well. Okay.
Yep, will do.
Thanks so much. We appreciate you so much for being with us, and God is so good. Wait just 1 second. Did I get something wrong? No, Pam Booker, I know who you are. I see you. I'm saying Pamela because your name says Pamela, but she's enjoyed it. So wonderful. But now Pamela Bridgman will be back next week with us because she is on the platform with us for GCBN. But okay, God is so good. I appreciate you guys. Those of you that are listening on Facebook Live, www.gcbnetwork.com, come join us. We'd appreciate having your support to put God back in business. Have a great afternoon, and we'll talk soon, Rich. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.